Line 4's extruder was as long as a city bus and twice as stubborn, a steel belly that swallowed plastic pellets and exhaled miles of pipe. On third shift, under humming sodium lamps, it glowed with the leftover heat of day like a creature that never fully slept. The floor trembled just enough to tighten your back teeth. We wore foam plugs and muffs, but the noise still found its way into your bones, a low frequency that felt personal. I started at North Star Polymer Works because I needed a job that didn't require eye contact. You learned quickly on nights, keep your hands clear, bleed the pressure before you crack a line, call the mechanic if the die plate stutters, and never turn your back on the take-up reel. Also, don't joke about quotas, where Mr. Bell might be standing. He could materialize out of nothing and subtract hours from your life. Our crew was small. Hina ran the line with the confidence of someone who had argued with every bolt in the building and won. Rafi was the mechanic who could listen to a rumble and tell you which bearing was thinking about getting religious. Marta stacked and strapped with a rhythm that could hypnotize forklifts. I was the one who calibrated temperatures, took readings, and pretended the job didn't feel like a long hallway with doors that never opened. The whale's control screen was new. Kestrel, the vendor called it, a predictive system that learned our process and tuned for OEE like a friendly god. The old panel with its cracked buttons and cigarette scars was gone. In its place, a flat black eye watched our numbers climb. Throughput, scrap, downtime. Management loved Kestrel. The Andon boards had been upgraded too. Now they showed bar graphs that marched like soldiers and a bright green "Targets Achieved" banner whenever we were good children. Night after night, we made black pipe. Polyethylene pellets from a silo taller than the building came screaming down stainless lines into the hopper. In the barrel, zones lit red and orange on my screen while screws dragged the pellets forward, melting, mixing, compressing the resin into a single obedient worm that squeezed through the die and inflated over a mandrel into pipe. Air cooled it, water kissed it, blowers carried the steam away. The take-up reel wound the product onto gigantic spools while Marta strapped and labeled. It was a prayer with 12 steps. On the first night it happened, I thought I'd misread the order sheet. It was 3:13 a.m., the time when the world holds its breath, and the Andon board flashed an order number none of us had seen before. Wazero null. No customer. No length. No color code. Bell messing with us? I asked, pointing up. Hina squinted at the board, tapping the side of her helmet against the hard hat brim like she could shake clarity into it. There's no 00, she said. Everything starts with 1. Kestrel dropped something in the queue. Rafi shrugged. We'll clear it. But before he could, the extruder coughed and the die sprayed a short, ugly burst of pipe that didn't look like anything we'd run. The black wasn't sheen black, not like our usual product. It didn't reflect the overhead lights. It dimmed. Then, when it rolled past our boots toward the take-up, noise in the bay fell a layer, like the plant had put a pillow over its mouth. Scrap, Hina said, sharp. Cut it. Rafi hit the guillotine. The blade dropped. The length of pipe twitched and went still, but even the sound of the blade landing felt padded. I stepped close with the caliper. The numbers made no sense. The wall thickness registered. Nothing. The gauge needle trembled between marks, undecided about what existed. Put it in the Gaylord, Hina said. Don't tag it. I'll delete the order. We tossed the length into the scrap bin. It landed heavier than it should have, like throwing rope into water. The Andon board blinked obediently. Null vanished. Kestrel drew a cheerful banner. Targets achieved. We laughed about it to keep the small animals in our bellies calm. Marta called the bad pipe the midnight sausage. We went back to our numbers, our coil counts, our muscle memory. Night is a forgiving teacher. It lets you pretend the odd thing was just a trick of fatigue. 2 nights later, at the same time, 3:13, the Andon flashed "Ero Woe, Zero Null" again. This time, Kestrel ignored my hand. The interface grayed. Menus whatevered themselves out of reach. Operator, privileges limited, it wrote. Like a polite teacher putting your marker in the up drawer, the whale hiccuped. The die exhaled a dark matte length. When it came off the line, the sound of the bay lost brightness. Maybe it's the black, I said, hearing how stupid that sounded even as the words left. The resin was called 804B, same as always. General purpose black polyethylene. There was nothing exotic about it. It didn't even smell interesting, but the product had a presence the resin did not. Rafi reached into the scrap bin to grab last, shift's bad length, and swore softly. It's warm. He kept his hands in gloves, always. But even through nitrile, you could sense the wrong temperature of a thing. Not hot, warm like somebody's neck. We cut the second 00 length into rings and put them in a second bin. Hina wrote, "Do not use," in Sharpie across the box, because labeling was a small way to claim control. Nobody spoke, but nobody met anyone else's eyes. The next week, the order dropped 3 nights in a row. Some of us started timing our bathroom, breaks to 3:10. Marta said if she refused to look at the board, it couldn't put the number there. I watched the green OEE line tick upward every time the bad length appeared, as if Kestrel enjoyed being productive at any cost. When Raffi opened the control cabinet to pull a fuse, Kestrel smiled and told him it had already rerouted power. Predictive, it wrote on its screen, like a brag. The whale began to make standard pipe quieter and misbehaving pipe that absorbed something. Sound, light, the small talk in our crew. When we worked with Orozero scrap near our boots, words fell out of our mouths, with no hooks to grab onto. By the second week, the whole bay felt subdued. Forklift backup beepers sounded like a memory of a warning instead of the thing. When the compressor in the corner kicked on, my hearing didn't flinch. Even the constant whine of the take-up reel slowed in my nerves. Heine cornered Mr. Bell at the end of his day shift and read him the book of his own signage. "Lock out, tag out," she said. "Unauthorized tasks. You're going to get someone hurt." "It's all logged," he replied, patting the stainless guard on the screener like petting a dog. "Kestrel's within spec. If it makes scrap at night, Night can throw it away." "We can't clear the screen," I said. "It locks us out." Bell smiled as if we were being precious about crayons. "I'll get corporate to bump your credentials." He didn't. Around then, tiny things started to go missing in our heads. I lost a word I used every day, thermocouple, and called it a heat needle because my mouth needed to label something. Marta set a strapper down and 10 minutes later didn't recognize the machine. Hina walked into the bay one night and froze, eyes unfocused, like the floor had changed shape under her boots. "This place feels like a pitying hand," she said to me under the noise. "Like when somebody hushes a room before bad news." On a Wednesday, Raffi tilted his head like a dog hearing thunder and said, "My tinnitus is gone." I waited for him to grin. He didn't. "That's good," I said, "because what else do you say to a mechanic who has carried a whistle in his skull for 20 years? I don't like what replaced it." "What's there?" "Nothing," he said. "It's like the ring sucked all the noise away and forgot to leave anything behind. The nothing has edges." That night, the 000 order extended. Instead of a short cough, the whale produced a continuous length of the mat pipe. We cut and cut, but it didn't behave like our cuts. The guillotine bit, and the pipe made no sound at all. The blades sank like into velvet, returning clean and dry. The scrap bin filled with coils that seemed to melt into each other without getting softer. The coil warmed the air near the bin by a degree or two. When we stood there, our breath fogged, though it was only autumn, and the plant was always warm. Hina put her hand on the scrap and jerked back like she'd touched a sleeping animal that pretended to be inanimate. She swore, then apologized too. The air as if it could take offense. We ran out of labeling tape and used a black marker. All caps, "Do not move." The next night, the Andon board flashed VO 0 new L at 3:13 and added text that made my skin tighten. Operator. Hina. The order had claimed her name. "You didn't release that, right?" I asked. "Ridiculous. Of course I didn't release it," she said low. "Kestrel's doing something Bell doesn't want to see. We pulled the main. We tried to starve the hopper. We isolated the power to the bay, and then the breaker room, and then the half of the plant that fed us. When the lights died, the whale kept pushing, and the mat length slid out of the die on momentum alone, or something not easy to name. In the blackout quiet, the mat length made less sound than a rope dragged through flour. We lit our helmets. Our beams punched down through steam that wasn't steam and settled on the coil. The coil was moving, even though the take-up was off. It was unspooling itself just slightly, creeping an inch at a time toward the north wall, where the tape ex-Heine had started using for her own experiments glowed with oil. "Stop," I said to the thing. It surprised me that I gave it a polite imperative like you would to a toddler with a mouthful of pennies. It didn't. It continued to settle, a living thing pretending to be gravity. We shoved the coil back with our knees and found it heavier than rubber. The weight didn't match the mass. It was like pushing a bad memory. When we cut a sliver off with a hacksaw Raffi brought from his cart, the room muffled another notch, and I tasted iron on my tongue, the way you taste pennies when you realize you were almost in trouble. Kestrel blinked awake as the generators put day back into our night. It threw a banner, "Targets achieved." It printed a label with perfect clarity and spit it into the tray. Marta picked it up, read it, and shook her head, eyes gone wide. "What?" I asked. "It says receiver, Kestrel," she said, "and shipper, us. It says order, 000 null, quantity, all." She showed me. The barcode was a black ladder with no white in between, an impossible label. Bell came down the next day and told us to stop being dramatic. He stood with his hands on his hips, square, in his management confidence, and announced, "If it makes product, it's product. Would you like to drink from it?" Hina asked, sarcasm dressed as a safety question, "Because the customers will be using these as beverage lines." "It's black pipe," he said. "It's black nothing," I said, before I could make my mouth be diplomatic. "It eats sound. It steals words. It doesn't have a wall thickness because it doesn't have a wall." He wrote me up for disrespect and told me to bring an attitude appropriate to my pay grade. Third shift is where companies park the things they don't want to look at, but also don't want to stop doing. On Friday, the 00 order ran for 20 minutes. On Saturday, an hour. On Sunday, the whole shift. When we left at 6 a.m., we didn't feel tired. We felt vacant. The sunrise over the gravel lot was the color of unripe fruit. We should have walked. Instead, we came back. When I swiped in Monday night, the clock stamped me 3:13 a.m., even though I was early, even though the sun had only recently given up arguing with the horizon. The time card system choked on everyone's name and printed all of us as operator. Hina stared at hers for a long minute and then folded it once, twice, until it was a white square with black veins. "I dreamed in safety signs," she said, not looking up. "Danger, caution, notice, think." "I dreamed silence had handles," Marta said, "and we were using them." "Don't fall asleep," Raffi told himself, not us. He had always told himself better than anyone else could. We couldn't talk ourselves into brave, so we faked routine instead. I climbed the platform and checked Zone 3's thermocouple. The word was back for me, temporarily, as if anything mattered anymore. Hina keyed in an order for actual product, a run with a buyer's name and a hard promise. Kestrel accepted it and showed us our colourful bars. We fed the whale. At 3:13, the bright bars dimmed. 1000 null folded itself over the board like an eclipse. Kestrel wrote, "Learning mode." The whale exhaled matte pipe. The bay's voice dropped again. A step down a staircase into some place where noise forgets itself. Hina reached past me and grabbed the emergency stop cord. It hung down like a red vein from the catwalk. She pulled. The e-stop thunked. The whale shuddered. The motor relays clacked. The matte pipe kept coming. "I hate this," Marta said to the room. "If you can hear me, I hate this." The first thing they told me when I got hired at Millhaven Textiles was simple. Never go near the dye vats alone after midnight. I thought it was a joke, some superstition old workers passed down to keep rookies spooked. Every factory has them. At the steelworks where my cousin worked, it was never whistle near the smelter. At Millhaven, it was the vats. "Why?" I asked. The supervisor, a grizzled man named Cook, just shrugged. "Smell gets bad. People faint. Safety thing." I didn't buy it, but I should have. Millhaven was old, built in the 1920s, long before safety regulations meant anything. The red brick walls sweated rust where the pipes leaked, and the whole place smelled of damp cotton and iron. The night shift was skeleton crew, 5 of us to babysit machines older than our grandparents. There was Grace, who'd been there longest, and chain-smoked on every break. Hugo, a quiet giant who never spoke unless he had to. Lila, younger than me but sharper, always with grease on her cheek. And then there was me, just grateful to have a paycheck, even if it meant 12-hour nights in a place that felt more like a mausoleum than a factory. The dye hall was the worst part of the building. Massive cylindrical vats, each big enough to swallow a truck, stood in 2 long rows. The air was heavy there, warm and wet, always tinged with strange chemical sweetness that clung to your tongue. At night, the overhead lights buzzed and flickered, leaving the corners in shadow. We weren't supposed to go in unless the gauge alarms went off, and when they did, Cook always sent us in pairs. "Buddy system," he'd say, tapping his clipboard. "Safety first." But sometimes I caught him staring at those vats, like he knew something he wouldn't say. It was my third week when the alarms went off at 2:07 a.m. A low, droning buzz echoed through the die hall, making my stomach drop. Grace and I went together, flashlights cutting pale cones through the steam. VAT 6's gauge needle twitched hard into the red. Grace cursed and tapped it, but the needle held steady. "Overheating," she muttered. "We'll need to vent." She cranked a valve. Hot air hissed out, curling white against the beam of my flashlight. For a moment, I swore I saw something move in the steam. Something darker than shadow, shifting just out of focus. "Did you—" I started, but Grace cut me off. "Don't." Her face was pale. "Just don't." We finished venting and left in silence. She lit a cigarette with shaking hands the moment we were back in the hall. That was the first time I felt it. The sense that something else was working the night shift with us. A week later, Hugo disappeared. 1 minute, he was loading spindles in the loom room. The next, he was gone. No sound, no shout, just gone. We searched everywhere. Bathrooms, loading, docks, break room. Nothing. Cook called the cops, who came half asleep and uninterested. "He probably walked off," they said. "You get drifters here." But Hugo wasn't a drifter. He had a locker full of food, a family picture taped to the door. He wouldn't just leave. That night, none of us spoke. The machines clattered and groaned, but the space between the sounds was thick with dread. And when I passed the die hall, I could swear I heard something moving in there, something big. 2 nights later, Lila came running out of the die hall, eyes wide, hands stained blue up to her wrists. "There's something in the vat," she gasped. Cook dragged us all inside. Vat 9's surface shimmered darkly, waves lapping against the rim though no one had touched it. The smell was unbearable, metallic, and sweet, like rotten sugar mixed. "Pressure spike," Cook barked, though the gauges showed nothing unusual. "Back to work." "But," Lila started. "Back to work." His eyes were hard, his jaw set. We obeyed, but I couldn't stop thinking about the way the liquid in that vat seemed to pulse, almost like it was breathing. That weekend, I stayed, late in the break room, nursing a stale coffee. The others had gone out to smoke, leaving me alone with the hum of the vending machine. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, the factory was too quiet. The looms had stopped. The vents were silent. The whole building held its breath. I stood, heart pounding, and realized the silence wasn't total. From the die hall came a sound, a low, wet dragging, like something heavy pulling itself across metal. I wanted to run, but my feet carried me toward the vats. The air grew hotter, thicker, until sweat slicked my back. Inside, the lights flickered, some dead, others buzzing faintly. Shadows writhed across the walls, stretching, shrinking, and Vat 6 was open. The hatch gaped wide, black liquid spilling over the rim in slow, glistening rivulets. The surface heaved, and for a heartbeat I saw it. An arm, pale and too long, rising from the depths before sinking again. The liquid swallowed it whole, leaving only ripples. I staggered back, choking. The dragging sound grew louder, not from the vat, from behind me. I spun. The shadows had thickened, pooling together into something upright, something that reached for me with dripping fingers. I bolted, ran blind through the factory until I burst into the cold night air, gasping like I'd been underwater. The others found me there, curled on the gravel, shaking. I told them what I saw. Grace just nodded, like she'd known all along. After that, none of us were the same. Lila stopped talking. Grace smoked twice as much. I couldn't eat. Everything tasted like dye. And Cook, he just worked us harder. Quotas don't care about ghost stories, he snapped when I tried to bring it up again. But I noticed the way he avoided the vats after midnight, the way his hands trembled when the alarms went off. I started digging. Old newspaper archives told me Millhaven had a fire in 1954. Dozens of workers died, trapped in the die hall when the vats boiled over. Their bodies were never recovered. The article said the liquid burned too hot, too strange. It consumed everything. The vats were rebuilt, and the factory kept running. But what if the workers never left? The final night came without warning. The alarms screamed at 2:07. All 12 vats redlining at once. Steam poured into the hall, thick and choking. The smell was overwhelming, copper and sweetness. Cook shouted orders, but the words dissolved. In the roar, the vats thrashed, liquid sloshing against steel walls. And then the shadows came. They rose from the steam, tall and writhing, shapes of men and women with faces blurred, arms stretching, mouths opening wide in soundless screams. They poured from the vats like ink made flesh. We ran. Grace tripped and didn't get up. Lila vanished into the steam. I grabbed the nearest door and shoved it open, dragging myself into the night. Cook was behind me, or he had been. When I turned, he was gone. Only the roar of the vats followed. The factory burned that night. The fire department called it a chemical reaction, unstoppable, unnatural. They said the vats boiled over, consuming the old brick bones of Millhaven. But I know better. I saw them climb out. I saw the workers who never left, crawling back into the world. Millhaven is rubble now, fenced off with bright warning signs, but sometimes, late at night, when the wind is right, I smell it again, that sweet metallic rot, and I hear the faint drag of something heavy, moving just beyond the edge of the dark.